All right, so I'm gonna begin today and read this email, and then Tarah, you're just gonna kind of jump on in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, here we go. All right, so
Put those readers on, honey.
I got him. All right. Hi, Tarah and EJ. Firstly, thank you both for the great work that you're doing through your counseling and sharing such valuable advice via your podcast. So you're welcome. Thank you. I recently started listening to your podcast and reaching out in hopes of some guidance. A little about my marriage. My husband and I dated for about a year before we got engaged, which was right before COVID. We ended up having our court marriage soon after. We waited to have our larger ceremony to celebrate with family and friends, and that ended up being rescheduled twice, but we finally did have our ceremony. Part of the rescheduling was due to COVID, of course, but the second reschedule was because my mother-in-law was in very serious condition in the hospital. She ended up passing away, and since then I've felt very disconnected from my partner. Your episode on handling grief and intimacy was extremely relevant, but despite some couples counseling and even our own individual counseling, I still feel like we're struggling to connect on a deeper level. It's made me reflect on our dating days and COVID days. And while there were normal arguments during our dating days, I'm wondering if maybe we rushed into things going off those superficial checklists of what we should be doing in life. There were a couple of times during COVID where I felt like, what have we done? Maybe this isn't going to work. But I remember thinking it felt like too late since we had already got court married. I guess there are many underlying issues such as lack of emotional connection, lack of intimacy, possibly slight distrust, feeling like his sister's a priority over me, and ultimately maybe just wanting different things out of a partner. We get along well as friends, but I feel like we're missing that deeper connection, and I'm not sure how much longer to keep trying. I understand every couple's situation is very different and nuanced, but I just wanted to reach out in case you both had any additional tips or any guidance. We don't have kids yet. I guess it's looming on me, and I really want to have a more stable relationship with him.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
So what I'm feeling from that listener email, thank you again for sending that in, is just a profound amount of confusion and grief around feeling connected with this person that they fell in love with, and also the amount of transitions that this couple has gone through together in a very short amount of time, from engagement to married to COVID to loss of a parent. I mean, there's just a lot here.
Yeah, and super early on,
Right.
like so many, so many of the couples we see, so many of the emails that we've received recently are this sort of theme of like a lot happening very early on, and then all of a sudden, sort of getting into a place where like, gosh, does this work?
Well, so one of the first things is like hyper vigilant time. I just remember the time of COVID, like not even like to put out, to put aside the fact that you're engaged and now getting married. COVID really triggered a lot of trauma and hypervigilance for a large population. People were passing away. We were scared. It was fear-based. So our brains are already in this like hypervigilant, unsafe feeling. And that's a lot to handle. But then to have the transition of a marriage and having to reschedule the wedding a couple of times, and then the loss of a parent. I'm just imagining right now, there is only so much the human heart and brain can process. I mean, I know for us, just getting married was like a huge transition. And then, right, 2 months later, we're pregnant with twins. Like, what? So I'm just, again, I want to normalize that this loss of disconnection. It could also be that there wasn't space to process all of the transitions and grief. And then when that happens, we kind of go into this story of like, maybe we just shouldn't be together. Maybe we rushed into it. We don't make sense of it because we're not online really in our frontal lobe, if you will, in our cortex.
Yeah. I mean, I think that because over the years, seeing so many couples, like no matter what way your relationship begins, it feels like there's a point where things become troublesome, where you look at how it began and think like, well, oh, it's because of this. Like, like I've heard, couples who got together when they were 14, 15-year-olds, and then they are in counseling in their 20s or 30s and like, oh, we should have never got together so early. And then there's people who, we were engaged for like 7 years and it went on forever. And maybe we should have never got married because if we didn't get married early on, it's like there's always a way to look back to data and say like, well, that's the reason. And I think like what that speaks to is just that, we come together in a variety of different ways. And sometimes there's like a total honeymoon or fairy tale version of it. But most of the time it's not, most of the time it's not.
Well, and then when this listener reached out and said, right, the mother-in-law had passed away when she had gotten sick, right? I think it was shortly after they got married, she felt like she lost her husband. Like, what was that process like for them? A lot of people don't know how to process grief in healthy ways. And so then it kind of transforms into what we call complicated grief. You're kind of cut off from yourself, which then cuts you off from your partner in other parts of the world or other parts of your self and others. And this sense of belonging is kind of ruptured. And in our society, in our culture, we don't give a lot of time for grief, right? Other cultures, like they let people like, we've got you here, take a month off, whatever it might be. Like there's just something really precious around allowing someone to have the space for it. And in our culture, it's like, yeah, just get over it. They passed away like a week ago. This should be. And so again, like that gets trapped in our bodies and then we feel sad, we feel hopeless. And then imagine like this new relationship, like a new transition, marriage, but you also have this feeling of like your belonging has like left you. And then there's sadness. And then when we're with each other, we mirror each other. So then we internalize the other person's sadness. So I guess one of my first things with this couple would be, what was that initial grief process like for them? How did they handle it?